Hello, everyone. Welcome to Skeptical Inquirer Presents. This is a series of live online presentations from experts who are devoted to advancing science over pseudoscience, media literacy over conspiracy theories, and critical thinking over magical thinking. I'm your host, stand-up comedian, author, cat mom, Leanne Lord, and I hope that you are planning to join us June 11th through 14th for SciCon's 50th anniversary. I'm emceeing there as well, and the lineup features some amazing folks, including the one and only Bill Nye, the science guy. Y'all be there or be a four-sided polygon. Now, this is the first Skeptical Inquirer Presents of 2026. We've been doing this show since summer 2020, and we've made a few changes that I think will make this experience even better for the audience and our presenters. The show is now on StreamYard, and that allows us to be seen simultaneously in real time on several social media platforms, including Facebook and YouTube, where you can comment and send in your questions. Today, we are learning about the survival curve, a 220-year story of scientific wonder with CFI Education Director Bertha Vazquez. So, y'all, did you know that before 1800, half of all humans born died before their 5th birthday? Like half, y'all. But breakthroughs such as vaccination, clean water, antiseptics, and antibiotics changed that. They turned medicine from bleeding and purging into an evidence-based system of care that actually saves and vastly improves our lives. It's all too easy to forget how recent and hard-won these advances are. Now, Bertha Vazquez, if you don't know, has been teaching middle school science in Miami-Dade County Public Schools for 24 years. She has a BA in biology from the University of Miami and a master's in science and education from Florida International University. She's the recipient of several national and local awards, including Samsung's Solve for Tomorrow contest and the Charles C. Bartlett National Excellence in Environmental Education Award. Woohoo! Not once, but twice, Bertha was Miami-Dade Science Teacher of the Year and was a finalist for the most prestigious science award in the country, the Presidential Award for Excellence in Mathematics and Science Teaching. Whew! I can think of no better way to start the year off than with a celebration of science and a reminder to be grateful for the discoveries and the people that laid the foundation for making modern life possible. So please welcome to the new and improved Skeptical Inquirer Presents, the one and only and one of my favorite humans, Bertha Vazquez. Bertha, thank you.
Hello. Yeah, thank you for that introduction. You're one of my favorite humans too.
Oh, so thank you.
This is going to be great. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let's go here and share and then go here. This is like being back in the classroom. Now, can you see just the main slide? Yes, you're seeing the main slide there, the first slide?
Yes.
Yay, science! So I'm ready to go. I'm very, very excited about this talk. I've given a lot of talks for SciCon and many years in the classroom, and I have to say this is my favorite talk I've ever done. And putting it together took a lot of time and learning, and I'm so excited to share with you everything that I've learned to put this talk together. But I want to start with a personal story. Every year, first day of school for 34 years, I ask my students to draw me a scientist. And this is what I got. And I got this for 34 years and not just in middle school. I taught high school briefly. I've done this with elementary school kids. I've done this with future teachers, future science teachers. And you're going to see a pattern. You're going to see a man, and he's going to have a lab coat, and he's going to be, usually there's a table there with chemicals on it, and he's going to be blowing stuff up. You know who that guy is, right? And you get this over and over and over again. If you're lucky, you get a girl, but she's also got, she doesn't have a lab coat on, but she's got the chemicals and everything else. And I stand in front of the room and I go through these papers, 30, 40 papers, and I pretend to be very upset. And I pretend to go, I can't believe this. Lab coat, crazy hair, chemicals, table, lab coat, crazy hair, chemicals, etc. And I pretend to be upset, but I'm kind of upset. Like, science has done so much for us, and this is what kids think of when I ask them to draw me a scientist. And we know why they're getting this, right? They're getting this because this is, in the popular culture, this is what a scientist looks like. My job as a science teacher is to erase this guy and to give them this. The fact that science is a mixture of curiosity and awe. That's what science truly is. So my job, like I said, is get rid of that guy, erase that guy, and replace him with this. In other words, replace that guy with themselves. I want students to see themselves doing science. I want them outside. I want them designing cars. Who knows? Sky's the limit. Beyond the sky's the limit, right? So I set forth from the first day of school to get kids doing science, hands-on science, trying stuff out, breaking test tubes, getting dirty. Look at the girl I love in the bottom left there. I actually blew her up. That's the face I want to see in my classroom. They've got oobleck in their hands. There's a protein chain behind them. There's DNA behind them from another class. That's what I want to see. And yeah, it's middle school, so we do get a little silly, and I have to admit I miss that. But in between, we do science. If we're going to talk about human evolution, I want them measuring skulls and comparing those skulls to other similar species. If we're going to be doing a study on the Everglades or birds, I want them in the Everglades. If we're going to be doing a sustainability program for Miami International Airport, I want them meeting with the leaders of Miami International Airport and growing plants and planting trees and everything else. But as important as all of this, I stress all the time in my classroom, I say, look around you. It's mind-blowing what science has given us. And it's so obvious to us, it's so common to us that we don't even think about how cool all of the appliances are on the screen right now. X-ray machines, artificial organs, satellites. Just think about this presentation. I'm in Miami, Florida. You're somewhere else in this country or somewhere else in the world. I'm chatting with Leanne, who's somewhere else in this country. And everything is bouncing off satellites. It's really mind-blowing if you think about it. And that is how I get rid of this guy, right? But as important as all of these things are, the scientific method is as important. It's possibly more important because this is the method. This is the best way that humans have to figure stuff out, because this method puts guardrails in place against our own flawed thinking. And my favorite part of this scientific method is think about it and try it again. When you're wrong, it's okay. As a matter of fact, scientists set up experiments to see if they're to prove themselves wrong, not to prove themselves right. And this is very, very, very important because our hunter-gatherer brains will always choose tribe over truth unless we're really thinking about it. And the scientific method protects us against our own motivated reasoning, our confirmation bias, our tribal thinking. Let me offer you a thought experiment. This is a thought experiment introduced by Richard Dawkins in more than one book and essay. And it really proves how powerful the process of science is. Let's pretend that overnight, tomorrow morning, we all wake up and all knowledge is gone. Not just scientific knowledge, history, music, literature, everything. All of our memory banks, internets, access, museums, books, it's all gone. Sadly, we'll lose all of this and much more. right? We'll lose art and we'll lose literature and we'll lose history because came from the creative spirit of our fellow humans. But I'll tell you what we will not lose. We won't lose the periodic table of the elements and the laws of motion and the behavior of light and the importance of antiseptics and DNA and radium. Maybe we don't call it radium because Marie Curie won't be around, but we'll discover radium, we'll discover hydrogen, we'll discover gravity, and energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. All of these things will come back because of the process of the scientific method. And that is why I love Science Saves, one of the programs of the Center for Inquiry, and I'm proud to be the director of Science Saves. And it's all about gratitude for the scientific researchers and successes of the past that have led us to this moment in human history. So I want to stop and talk a second about gratitude. Now, this slide had way too much text on it when I first started because there's a lot of science to gratitude. And I broke it down into the nutshell version of this. We know that gratitude improves your mental and physical health in many ways. And it's important to remember how much science has given us. And I'm going to take you on a personal journey today, along with a historical one. Let's start with that personal journey. In my 20s, I spent a lot of time in Europe. I studied and lived in France on multiple occasions. And I loved going to cemeteries. It's kind of my dark side, I guess. I loved the monuments and the history. But one of the things that I noticed when I went through older cemeteries, now mind you, I live in Miami, so there's not cemeteries that go back more than 90 years here, 100 years. What I noticed was this. Look at the ages of the names of these people in this older cemetery. 9, 11, 12, 10. You had baby lands in cemeteries. The two images to the left are in the United States. The images on the right are in Europe, Germany, and Austria. A lot of babies died. And as I walked through these cemeteries, I noticed something. I noticed that the dates on the tombstones got closer and closer to the modern era, closer and closer to now, there were fewer and fewer tombstones. And I kept this idea with me when I was asked to lead the education department of Science Saves. And I found this amazing graph. Close to half of all children died before their 5th birthday in the year 1800. Look at the number in 2020. So the x-axis there is going from 1800 to 2020. Look at the dramatic drop in child mortality from 1800 to 2020. It's truly astonishing. But as Leanne was saying, before the year 1800, half of all people who ever lived, about half, died before the age of 5. My first thought was, well, how many people lived before the year 1800? About 95 to 100 billion human beings were born before 1800. And it did not matter if you were born 40,000 years ago in a hunter-gatherer tribe or at the height of the French Enlightenment. That number didn't change. What happened in 1800? What started to change? Well, first, let's see what happened before 1800. And let's do that with one of our greatest, or the greatest forefather, and that is George Washington. Because, my friends, medicine wasn't always a good thing. Do you know what happened to him the last 12 years of his life? The last 12 hours of his life? In the last 12 hours of his life, he got a cold, and it got worse. And the first thing they did was drain 12 ounces of his blood. And over the next 10 hours, they drained 60% of his blood. Now, where's your immune system? You know where it is, right? It's in your blood supply. His neck was coated in wax, beef fat, and I have no idea why, dried beetles. And it caused blisters, which were then drained. He gargled a mixture of molasses, vinegar, and butter. His legs were covered in wheat bran poultice. I hope you're starting to feel very, very bad for our first president and founding father. He was given an enema, and finally a purgative of mercurous chloride. And of course, he died. So medicine wasn't always a good thing. As a matter of fact, this era is often called the period of heroic medicine. Wealthy patients fared worse than commoners because they had access to this medicine. One of my trips to Paris last summer, as a matter of fact, I visited the Museum of History of Medicine. It is a virtual torture chamber of some of the things that doctors put our ancestors through. And I want to shout out to Stuart Weiss. He's the reason I visited this place. He mentioned it in an article for a free inquiry. This museum is full of trepanation tools. Those were tools that were used to bore a hole into people's skulls because they thought that could solve everything from epilepsy to evil spirits. And of course, there's tons of bloodletting equipment because they thought the excess blood caused disease. They thought this idea of the four humors and blood, you were not in balance, so you had to be bled. The good old days? I don't think so. On the left is something that they use to get rid of kidney stones. Gentlemen in the audience today, I did not include the illustration that came next to that device because I like you guys and I don't want you to see what that device was used for. Think about a modern surgery room, a surgical operating room. Look at all of the things in that room. Do you know what that room would have looked like in 1800? That's what that room would have looked like in the year 1800. And if you remember that modern humans have been around for over 300,000 years, it's pretty crazy that for the vast, vast majority of that time on Earth, that's what medicine looked like. And don't even think about all of these high-tech things. Think about these things, the day-to-day things that you might have in your own homes or at a doctor's office, like stethoscopes, thermometers, gloves. They didn't have any of this. This is all extremely recent stuff. And again, like I said, this is all about gratitude, right? So I want you to think about these things. One of the books that I read to prepare for this presentation was Extra Life by Stephen Johnson. And he broke innovations thanks to science and scientists. He broke it into 3 parts. That's why you have 3 columns on that screen. The first is millions of lives saved. And that includes things like anti-malarial drugs and something like as simple as we think of today, CPR, radiology, refrigeration, seatbelts. Hundreds of millions of lives saved. The list gets smaller, but you're looking at things like antibiotics and bifurcated needles, blood transfusion, chlorination, and pasteurization. And finally, the final column is billions of lives saved. There are only 3 things on that list. If I were in the classroom, I'd make you to raise your hand before I showed you, but we don't have enough time. So let me go ahead and put it up for you. Artificial fertilizer, toilets and sewers, right? Keeping pooping water away from drinking water and all other hygienic protocols. And of course, vaccines. So for Science Saves, one of the things I do is I write lessons. And throughout this presentation, in these blue boxes, you're going to see some of the lessons. I won't go into them because I know this isn't a science teacher crowd, but I wanted to have them up. Let's take a look at this journey now. Let's go back to before the year 1800 and see how we moved that curve, how we reduced child mortality. The first stop is Lady Mary Wortley Montagu. Her husband, was the ambassador in Turkey at the end of the 1700s. And she noticed that in Turkey, smallpox was not as big a deal as England. And let me remind you that smallpox, along with tuberculosis, are the greatest killers of humans in history. And she noticed that when someone had a mild case of smallpox, they would take material from those pustules that smallpox leaves on your skin, and they would apply it to healthy people, healthy children. And the child would be sick for a few days and then get up and be completely immune to smallpox. And this took the death rate, the fatality rate from smallpox from about 30%. And mind you, it's about 50% if you're not a healthy person. And back in those days, there were a lot of people walking around who are not healthy people, to less than 2%. It's still, I have to say, very scary to inoculate or variolate a healthy child and still have a 1 to 2% fatality rate. And there is Lady Mary Montagu. She variolated or inoculated her own son. She did lose a brother to smallpox, so this was a subject that was important to her. This may have even changed the course of the American Revolution. Dr. Andrea Love has a wonderful article that explains that we were losing the American Revolution because in England, smallpox was endemic. It was all around them. And the soldiers who came over from England to fight were more than likely already immune to smallpox. Whereas in our country at the time, it was still a pandemic. It was epidemic. And our soldiers were falling like flies to smallpox epidemics that took place throughout the Revolutionary War. And at first, George Washington was like, gosh, no, I am not variolating my soldiers. It is too risky. But after one particularly deadly winter, he decided to lead the first government mandate, if you will, and that was to inoculate all of his soldiers against smallpox. And that was, in the eyes of many, the turning point in the American Revolutionary War. I'd like to also mention that Benjamin Franklin lost a 5-year-old son to smallpox, and word got around that he lost his 5-year-old son not to smallpox, but to smallpox inoculation. And Benjamin Franklin had to say, no, that is misinformation. I did not lose my son to smallpox variolation. I lost my son to smallpox. So, my friends, misinformation about vaccines is nothing new. And might I add, the misinformation in general goes back millions of years. It's nothing new to our time today. And that's a shout out to Melanie Teresa King, who lent me this wonderful slide. Moving forward, though, I don't know about you, but 1 to 2% mortality of a healthy child is still a little high for my modern taste. So after variolation comes vaccination. That's going to replace variolation. And that was Edward Jenner in England who carried out a wildly unethical experiment. He heard a dairymaid say, I shall never get smallpox, for I have had cowpox, which is a very related virus. And what he did was he took a young boy on the farm named James Phipps, and he did the same thing. He cut little incisions into the young man's skin and infected him with cowpox. He got sick for a few days, and a few weeks passed. He exposed young James Phipps to smallpox, the dangerous stuff, and he had no reaction. And that dropped the mortality rate to less than 1%. And again, we're going to deal with that misinformation, right? Vaccination, the word vaccination comes from vaca, or in Spanish or Latin means cow, because he used the cowpox virus to vaccinate against smallpox. And people thought, oh my goodness gracious, I'm going to have cows growing out of my face and growing out of my arms and so forth. So again, this is nothing new. And I think this is one of the greatest success stories in history. The United States, along with the World Health Organization, has eradicated smallpox, this deadly, deadly killer of our fellow human beings, from the planet Earth. So we started these mass vaccination campaigns that went all the way to 1980, where the smallpox virus was officially eradicated. Now, we do have a live smallpox virus in a vial in the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta. And at the time were the Soviets, but the Russians also have one. Both countries kept this, thinking that maybe one day, if smallpox ever pops back up again, we're going to need the virus to create a new vaccine. A little scary to think about. That, by the way, is a bifurcated needle. I mentioned that's one of the things that saved hundreds of millions of lives. It was a needle that was made to give someone, to deliver the exact dose of smallpox vaccine that is necessary, and made it a very easy, quick vaccination to give. So I just covered really that first part. I know we went all the way to 1980, but I'm covering that first drop in this graph. The next big drop is going to be keeping poop water away from drinking water. People thought diseases came from bad air. They called it miasma. And it was John Snow, known as the father of epidemiology, who said, maybe it's not the bad air because everything smells bad. We're in London in 1854, right? Open sewers and water going down the middle of the streets. And it wasn't a pretty picture. And he was able to use this map to trace a cholera outbreak in 1854. And he realized that it was coming from a specific pump, water pump that people were using because, of course, they didn't have running water in their homes, something we take so for granted today. Now, I did create a lesson about this where I erased his numbers, and the students have to go back in, identify the pumps, and you can see right smack in the middle of those larger numbers, that is the pump that finally, John Snow persuaded the authorities in London to turn that pump off, close it, shut it off, and the cholera epidemic halted. And they realized that some things are waterborne diseases, like cholera, like polio, for example. Incidentally, there is a replica of this water pump right where it used to be in London, in Soho, London. And behind there, you can see it says John Snow Pub. They named that pub after him, which I think is funny because he was very anti-alcohol. So next time you're in London, check that out. And we have lessons on this as well. Because in the US, smallpox was no laughing matter. I'm sorry, cholera was no laughing matter either. I mean, look at those numbers from 1849 to 1851. In those cities, the death rates were 5 to 10% of their populations. Today, we have less than 20 cases of cholera annually. That's a masterful difference. It's a wonderful difference. It's pretty crazy. Next step on this journey is Ignaz Semmelweis. This is my favorite guy on this journey. Do you know what he said? He said, wash your hands. Oh my goodness, something so normal for us today. In his 6 years in the mid-1800s at this hospital in Budapest, his infant mortality was less than 1%. Less than 1%. Let me remind you that in Prague and Vienna at the time, it was 10 to 15% because these doctors, which had pretty much just taken over from the midwives at this point in time, were working with cadavers and very sick people. And they'd walk into the maternity ward of the hospital. They didn't wash their hands and they just started helping women give birth. And when they found out, when they were told, no, you guys are causing this mortality rate, please wash your hands, they were very upset and they didn't want to believe it. And sadly, Ignaz Semmelweis was rejected. He was mocked. He was like a cancellation, right? An 1850 cancellation. And he ended up in a mental hospital. And ironically and sadly, he died of sepsis. This is what his family looked like after his death. So he's not pictured in there. It's quite sad. If you go to Budapest, there is a Semmelweis museum. Just think about this. Hand hygiene has saved hundreds of millions of lives since the mid-1800s. Let's go deeper here. Childbirth alone, this has saved tens of millions of mothers and infants. Modern infection control, like hand hygiene, prevents millions of deaths each year globally. This man deserves all of our gratitude. He really and truly does. Which leads us to two giants of modern medicine and better medicine. Pasteur, who's the father of the germ theory. He identified why diseases spread. And lesser known, we have Joseph Lister, who showed how to stop infections in medical practice. One of the books I read for this presentation is called The Butchering Art. I highly, highly recommend. The photo cover on the left is the American cover to this book, and that's what surgery looked like before Joseph Lister. And on the right, that is the UK cover, and that's what surgery looked like after Joseph Lister. And yes, Listerine is named after him. It wasn't his idea, but it was an American company that named Listerine after him. And I'm sure if I were to ask anybody in this audience today, well, what's another big saver of human lives? You'd all say antibiotics. We all know about Fleming. He's the one who figured it out by accident, right? The bacteria on his Petri dish where there was some mold growing disappeared. But I also want to shout out to Florian Chain, because nothing really happened in 1828 when Fleming figured this out. It wasn't until the Second World War when Florian Chain decided to explore further, isolate penicillin, and use it in the armed forces, the American armed forces. So a conservative estimate suggests that tens of millions of lives saved worldwide in the last 80 years. Which brings us to 1930 to the present day. So we've already seen a tremendous improvement with hand hygiene, antiseptics, smallpox and vaccinations and antibiotics. But now let's focus on this last part here of this graph. The first thing is artificial fertilizer. Billions of lives. Famines used to be much, much, much more common. And as a matter of fact, in the late 1970s, Paul Ehrlich published a book saying we are not going to be able to keep up with the world population. Human population is expanding, growing ever so quickly, and we just cannot feed the world. He wasn't exactly right, and that's because of artificial fertilizer. So we have several lessons on that. And now let's go to 1950. To the parents in the audience, if I may ask, what are your greatest fears today? I want to know, what do you think the greatest fears were back in 1950? Well, one was nuclear war, but the other one was polio. People were very, very worried about this disease. It affected children. It affected them in the summer until Jonas Salk just he isolated the virus and was able to develop a vaccine in 1953. The last known case was in Somalia in 1977. We do have ongoing cases in Pakistan, Afghanistan, and yes, as of last year, in the United States. Have a look at these numbers, though. Global cases have really dropped, and I don't think anybody born today knows what an iron lung is. Personal story, there's my grandfather on the left opening the very first box of polio vaccine arriving in Havana, Cuba in 1955, which is when the vaccine was distributed worldwide. Another big step is the MMR vaccine. And before we get to measles, which of course is the big one, let's talk about mumps and rubella. Mumps, Morris Hillman was the one who isolated and developed this vaccine. That's him in the photograph there with his young daughter. She got mumps and he took her virus and was able to develop the vaccine for that. And rubella, also known as German measles. It is not dangerous for you or me, but it is very dangerous if you are in the first trimester of your pregnancy. As a matter of fact, a woman with rubella during the first 3 months of pregnancy has up to 90% chance of giving birth to a baby with rubella. And this is exactly what happened to my mom. That's my mom in the center there with my dad just behind her, my uncle to the left of the photo. I don't know who the guy is with the bottle of rum, but he's a good Cuban with his Bacardi rum in his hand. So my mom worked at the Cuban Refugee Center in the 1960s when arriving from Cuba, and a man in her office had German measles, rubella, came to work against his doctor's orders and infected 4 pregnant women with rubella. Of the 4, my mom was the only one who had a healthy baby, and that is my older brother, Louis. Measles. I separated measles because it's really been in the news today. It's not that fatal. Only 1 to 2 children die for every 1,000 that contract the disease, but it has a 90% infection rate. It is the most contagious disease we know. So if almost every child out there gets measles before their 15th birthday, well, that changes everything, doesn't it? It does make it quite a deadly disease. And now we have dropped measles. Here you go from 1980 to 2021. There's been a steady drop, but there's still, if you notice, close to 60,000 measles deaths worldwide as of 2021. However, the vaccination has averted more than 60 million deaths between 2000 and 2023. And then it's not just about science. It's about science influencing public policy. Simply adding iodine to our table salt decreased goiter prevalence from 20 to 60% to under 5% in school-age children in the areas where this was common. And speaking also of public policy, you have seatbelts. Seatbelts are a big, big deal. Cars were very, very deadly. And I want you to look at the dotted line. The dotted line shows you per capita, because of course there's a lot more cars on the road today. But you can see how we've dropped the per capita deaths of car accidents thanks to seatbelts. And of course, there was resistance at first from the auto industry they didn't want to put seatbelts. It would be costly to do so. But eventually we were able to do that. That is Nils Bohlin. He is the inventor of the seatbelt that we find in our cars, a 3-point seatbelt. And of course, the car company he worked for, Volvo. So folks, what we're dealing with now is what I would call generational amnesia. People have forgotten what it was like to have half of our children die before the age of 5. Just this weekend, I presented this in Los Angeles, and a friend of mine came to see me. She told me about wild pregnancy and free births. Look it up. It was a Guardian article just last week, I believe. People are promoting, these influencers are promoting pregnancy with no doctor's visits, no scans, nothing, and have babies at home with no midwives, no medical professionals whatsoever. As you can guess, the death toll is rising. And this is raw milk. They do warn you on their websites to be careful with raw milk. And they actually suggest you boil the milk before drinking it, which, as you know, is called pasteurization. It's pretty crazy, isn't it? And I do want to stop and point out there is a poverty divide. And some of these diseases that we're talking about are still prevalent around the world. Tuberculosis is a very important one. Think about this. The death rate from tuberculosis in Ethiopia in 1990 equals the death rate in the United States in 1890. The cure is where the disease is not, and the disease is where the cure is not. That's another great book that I read. Malaria, also the prevalence is going down. It is the most dangerous animal in the world, the mosquito. Kids are very shocked to hear that. But of course, it is the vector to several diseases, the most deadly, of course, being malaria. I'd like to shout out to the ladies. We couldn't do science in the 1800s, but we sure are doing science now. And of these ladies, Pearl Kendrick and Grace Elderling are responsible for the whooping cough vaccine, which used to kill 200,000 children globally every year. So that vaccination has saved tens of millions of children over the 20th century. And a very important shout out to Dr. Frances Kelsey. She applied to work at the FDA, and she was hired because the gentleman in charge of hiring thought she was a man because her name was Frances. Well, thalidomide, as some of you may recall, was used as a medicine for morning sickness in the early months of pregnancy. Thalidomide causes babies to be born with small limbs, as you can see in that photograph there. And Frances Kelsey did not think there was enough evidence to allow this drug into the United States. And she got a lot of pressure from her colleagues, of course, from the drug company that was producing and selling thalidomide. And she refused to authorize thalidomide for market. She had concerns about the lack of evidence. And that is why we only had a handful of thalidomide cases in the United States when this was a terrible, terrible issue in Europe at the same time. And for that, Dr. Frances Kelsey received the highest honor from President Kennedy that a civilian can receive from the US government. And what she said was, imagine if my name had been Rose or Anne. She might not have gotten the job, and thalidomide might have been as prevalent in the US as it was in Europe. And I love to think about what's next. What's next? CRISPR is already saving lives. Artificial intelligence. I know we worry about it, but there is a positive. Maybe I know that it could find hundreds of new antibiotics in the time that a human cannot. We also have cancer immunotherapy, which it's like coming full circle from Mary Montagu, right? Using our own immune system to protect us from disease. And that is already showing promise in survival rates. The green bars are with immunotherapy for these different cancers here on this bar graph. Now, I love teaching kids about this. I have kids talk about what would they invent if they could be scientists. And they give me stuff like this, like glasses that cure blind people and wings for birds that have lost their wings. And some of the stuff that my students have told me have even come true. They wanted to help cure paralysis. And there is an actual brain implant, which today helps a paralyzed man walk naturally. So here's the same graph that I showed you earlier with some annotations showing you where things go and some lessons. This is the books that I used to read and learn about this. And I want to talk to you a quick second about Science Saves. Science Saves doesn't just do teacher resources. We celebrate National Science Appreciation Day every year on March 26th. That is the day that Jonas Salk announced his successful polio vaccine trials. We also give away $15,000 cash to high school seniors through our scholarship program. And the due date for that is in May, and you could look that up on our website. Green states or cities in those states celebrate National Appreciation Day last year. And just think about polio. I didn't talk about this specifically earlier, but we've decreased polio cases by more than 99%. 20 million people are walking around today where they would have otherwise been paralyzed had it not been for the vaccine. And we've saved 1.5 million lives. So have a look at our scholarship winners online. They have beautiful, these are these high school seniors. We have wonderful videos, which I'm not going to show you because I am running out of time, but all of these are available on the website. And I just wanted to quick show you, these are the programs that I run for the Center for Inquiry. And this has been about the center one there, Science Saves, but we also have an evolution program for teachers and how to identify misinformation. And everything we offer, thanks to the donors like some of you out there, is free. And we've done very well, excuse me. We've had 377 TIES workshops in 10 years, 84 Science Saves workshops in 3 years, and 54 Generation Skeptics workshops in 2 years. We offer all sorts of cool stuff like resources. We offer webinars. There's our Generation Skeptics page and our Science Saves page. Teachers try all of these resources out in the classroom. We're always looking for presenters, by the way. We bring in guest speakers. We also meet children when we go out. I'll be visiting Naples this weekend to meet with some students and adults as well. This job has also given me the opportunity to write some books. And there will be a book coming out now it's fall 2027 about the topic of this webinar. So I'm very excited about that. And I don't think I have time to show you, but on the next slide, and it is on YouTube as well, the video that we created for Science Saves, which was the inspiration for this talk. And it takes you through the discoveries and innovations, which I just mentioned in this talk. That's the front of the video. It starts in a cemetery. And finally, remember I told you that the first day of school, I asked students to draw me a scientist? Well, on the last day of school, I have them draw me a scientist again. And this is what I get. I get kids out there doing science, scuba diving and digging for fossils and being pediatricians, as this lady here, studying birds in a tree and collecting data outside. And that's why I do what I do. And I know that is the motivation for many of you here in this audience today. Think about the future. Think about the science that's still ahead of us, that our young people and our children will be doing one day. It's really exciting. And I hope this conversation or this presentation has been uplifting for you. I hope it's made you realize how grateful it is that you can walk over to the kitchen right now and get some safe drinking water. It's just the fact that I am speaking to you from another state or country and you can hear me. It's pretty unbelievable. And I know there's a lot of bad things happening in the world right now, but it's also wonderful to focus on the advances that our fellow humans have given us. So shout out to those scientists, and remember, science saves. And that, my friends, is my presentation. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Bertha, thank you so much. I'm sure I've said this to you before, and you may have heard this from other people. I wish you had been one of my science teachers, because I absolutely love you asking them to draw what they think a scientist is in the beginning and in the end. And in the end, it's like science is me.
Yes, they draw themselves.
Yes.
And that's so important for me for them to see that they can be scientists. And that's one of the days like I go, okay, all of that hard work has paid off a little bit.
Absolutely. And I will say I am definitely one of those people. While I am not a scientist, I do feel like a science appreciator. Anytime I wake up and like I flip a light switch, I have no idea how the electricity gets in my house. I don't know how to do that. But when I flip the switch, assuming that I've paid the bill, the light comes on. Science.
Yes. It's so much. I actually ask the kids what's electricity. And I walk around and I make them feel kind of bad that they have no clue. It's about a copper wire rotating around a magnet. But just this, Leanne, the fact that there's clean drinking water in here. This is one of the things that this isn't hundreds of lives. This is billions of lives. The fact that I have clean drinking water in this container.
You mentioned that you went to the museum in Paris. I went to a similar museum, a museum of science. I was in Italy, and they have benches, strategically placed throughout, because you do need to sort of sit down at some point and take it all in, and you realize we are living in an era where things happen so quickly, and that's not really how science works. It took a lot of people many years doing things wrong.
Yeah.
In order to figure out how to get there. And that's a lot of people over a lot of time.
And I want to point out that, I hit some of the heroes, but they weren't working alone. And there's a lot of people behind those heroes and a lot of effort that went into that as well.
Yeah. We're big on, it was one person, individualism. We did it alone. No, nobody did this alone at all. I'm not even doing this alone. We have a tech crew behind us. Everybody making sure that this happens. And I have a cat next to me who is somehow doing his part. I just want to mention a couple of things really quickly from your presentation that made me chuckle when you were showing what an operating room looks like now and what it would have looked like then. And it was a blank room. And I'm thinking that looks like a scene from Severance, if there are any Apple TV Severance fans. And I'm also tickled that the father of epidemiology, Jon Snow, is named after Jon Snow, the King of the North. For my Game of Thrones fans, clearly I'm watching way too much television.
Maybe it's the other way around.
Well, perhaps it is indeed the other way around.
I think it's hilarious. There's a pub named after him, and he was a teetotaler.
I know. He's probably whirling in his grave if such a thing is real, and it's not. You said something that disturbed me. I guess I missed this in the news. Polio is back?
Yeah, last year we had our first case. I believe it was in Brooklyn, New York.
Are you serious?
He came in from another country with it.
Okay. Ooh, that is indeed disturbing. I'm after that. I'm in the forgetting generation. I'm in the amnesia generation that doesn't realize. I was a sickly kid, but I was a sickly kid who got fixed.
Thank you, science.
Yeah, thank you, science. Thank you, parents with insurance. I guess it was a little different back then. But
how about that wild pregnancy? I just learned about this. Pregnancy with no doctor's appointments, no tests, nobody present while giving birth, no medical professional. We've gone nuts. And it's two influencers on social media that they've made over $1 million on this.
Of course they have, because the grift is ever present. Oh my gosh, I can't even date on my own. Like, what are we doing? Okay, listen, we have some questions here, and I'm putting on my glasses to make sure that I get these right. This wasn't a question, but when you talked about the water pump that he traced the cholera epidemic to, the outbreak, is it true that when they pulled it out, they found a dead rat there at the bottom?
Oh gosh, I don't know.
Okay.
Very
Someone
possible.
someone in the comments mentioned that, and I would not
It's
be
super
surprised if
interesting.
that was a thing.
Poor rat died of cholera.
I
I don't
know.
know if rats get cholera, but I'm sure there was a lot of other things wrong with 1854 London, but
I bet. There's a question that I had about smallpox when they started using the virus to inoculate. I don't remember what that word was when we were calling it.
variolation or
Thank
inoculation.
you. How did they figure out how much to use back then?
That's amazing. That goes back thousands of years. Buddhist monks in China and India were doing that. And Lady Mary Montagu saw it taking place in Turkey. And they would just take one smallpox pustule is probably 3-4 millimeters wide.
Okay.
And they would just grind that up and just put it into a person's skin.
Okay.
And it's crazy, but she saw it and she's like, whoa, this works. And she was an influencer of the late 1700s, and she took that back to England with her, mid 1700s, and people listened to her, and that made it across the pond, and it started happening in the US as well.
Okay.
Well,
yeah,
it wasn't the US at the time, but
right. No, because I was fascinated, like, how do they know how much? Because I'm one of those people, if a little is good, then a lot is better, and that's not always
no. And I think they would look for mild cases of smallpox. But I mean, if you were not well, if you were an unhealthy person, it was a 50% mortality rate. Can you imagine?
We would call that today being immunocompromised, maybe.
Yeah.
You know. All right, folks. First of all, I want to thank everybody for joining us here in our new way of doing this. This is amazing. What has not changed is the smallness of the font. For me when I'm reading questions. But the first question that came through, and thank you for this, because I think this is a big one for you that you are familiar with. Being a teacher, how do you deal with children of anti-vaxxers? How do you persuade them not to believe unfounded criticism of vaccines and evolution, or is it not a persuasion thing? I mean, how do you address that?
I address it exactly the way you just saw, and I learned that. And when I do the evolution stuff, I don't talk about creationism. I don't mention that some people think the world is 6,000 years old. I turn that around and I say, evolution is amazing. Look how cool this is, right? There's so many cool things. So if you talk about that survival curve and you talk about, forget MMR, talk about smallpox vaccination, talk about polio vaccination, it sinks in. It sinks in. You don't have to be negative. You can be very, very positive and give people pause and make them think. I think that's how I did it, because I think teachers are by nature risk averse. We don't like confrontation. Not so much, I didn't get it so much coming from students, but there were some absolutely, I can't say a bad word here, but terrible teachers telling the kids that it was the coronavirus vaccine, the COVID vaccine was messing with their DNA and all these things. And the kids would come running to me and say something. I go, you have to tell your parents to call the school and tell this guy to shut up. He's lost his job since then, by the way.
Of course.
It's a good thing.
Of course. I think this is a huge generalization, but I think with the proliferation of social media, we're all very quick to do this, to yell at folks, to be negative, to assume the worst about folks. And just a little bit of advice that I try to keep with me is, instead of calling somebody out, can you call them in? Yeah. And that's what I got from what you just said. It's like, no, let's start with the positive. Let's start with the good stuff. Is that going to work 100% of the time? Who knows? But some is better than none.
Yeah, I don't get it.
Yeah, no.
Also, as a parent myself, I heard Richard Dawkins say this: vaccination is something active that you're doing to your child. If you do nothing and nothing happens, okay, but to actively do something to your child and he gets sick or she gets sick, that's kind of scary. So we got to give parents some grace. They're getting all this misinformation. They're not sure who to believe, where to turn. So I do feel bad for pediatricians and everything that they're going through right now.
Oh, for sure. And I should have said this up front, just full disclosure, everyone. There was a time when I was anti-vax. And
really?
in my defense, I was 5 years old and the needle looked really big.
I should have seen that one coming. I should have seen that one. The guy in the photo opening the first box of polio vaccine, when I saw him, he lived across the yard from me. When I saw him walking towards my house with needles in his pocket, I ran.
Of course.
Ran from my grandfather, my pediatrician.
You should have start with cookies, and then we'll move to needles. I think.
Ouch! And they were bigger and thicker back then, by the way, too.
Oh my gosh! So needle development has I guess improved over time as well. Because I was a kid, I had to get allergy tested. That's why I'm not afraid of needles now. So like every week I'd get pierced with needles, and I literally sat there thinking, if this is what I have to do, then I'm just gonna sit. I was such a smart little kid back then, way better than I am now as a grown-up. I'm a mess as a grown-up, but it was a thing that I'm sure it's easier now. Kids don't have to get tested that way with a ton of needles anymore, but they're better needles. Hey Kenny, thank you. That shout out to Kenny for being in our tech crew, making sure that this is happening in this new and amazing way. But he wants to know, he asked a question, how many videos are submitted each year for Science Saves, and what's the process of choosing the winners? I'm assuming it's not Thunderdome. The children don't fight it out.
No, not Thunderdome. So the first year we did it, we got about 200 videos. And the last year, 2025, we were over 500, about 555 videos.
Okay.
And the first line of judging. So I see them all, and I got to tell you, they're all good. Even if it's a student sitting in front of their computer like we are right now and talking about their mom and how she was cured from breast cancer, or their baby brother who was born blue and they administered CPR and other things, they're all good. But what sets apart the really good ones is there's some editing involved. There's photos. There's an explanation of the science behind whatever science they're talking about. And so if you go to sciencesaves.org, you can click on scholarship, and you can see the due date for this year. And you can see, I highly recommend, if you're thinking about having a student do this, has to be a high school senior, look at some of the past winners. So you can see what it is that we're looking for. But I got to say, it's the 2 or 3 worst days or best days of my job, because seeing all of these stories, one after the other, I cry. I really, really cry. They're really amazing videos. And on our Science Save social media, we start posting one a day starting around March. End of March, we'll post past winners and past good ones. So you can clue into that as well.
Wow, that's amazing. I'm still video averse. I don't know why. And
kids are very good at it.
Oh, of course. Yeah, I didn't grow up with it. I'm still adjusting. And I do want to say, I am one of those people that's AI averse as well. I'm not tech averse, but AI does scare me. And thank you for saying the things that it can be used for.
Yeah, it's not antibiotics, for example.
Yeah, it's not the tool, it's how it's used. And humans are always going to find a way to use something terrible or use it for something terrible or use it for something amazing. And there is that side of it. So thank you. Bertha, we are at time. I want to thank you. I wish we had time for you to share some of the videos. But I know that we didn't have it. I am appreciative of the fact that we had you and your presentation, and thank you for kicking us off for 2026. And I just want to say to the audience, if you missed any of Bertha's presentation, we tape all of these things, and you will see it has been recorded, and it will be available at skepticalinquirer.org. And again, thank you for joining us. I hope you can join us June 11th through 14th for SciCon's 50th anniversary. It is going to be amazing. My thanks again to Skeptical Inquirer, the Center for Inquiry, and of course to all of you in the audience for choosing to spend the time with us. My name is Leanne Lord, and until next time.
See you at SciCon.
See you at SciCon.